Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is your boy Evan. We got some breaking news coming out this morning, right? We had a lot of stuff happen last night and yesterday, and I think it'd be smart to talk about it, right? Now, my takes on this, I'm a little bit different than what most typical conservatives are, right? I recognize the threat that Iran has to their region as well as the rest of the world in funding terrorist proxies. However, I am also not a Zionist. I'm not a pro-Israel conservative. I'm not an anti-Israel conservative, but I am a pro-America conservative. And being dragged into a war with Israel is just objectively not an American interest. And what I say may upset some of y'all. And if that's the case, let me know in the comments. Tell me where I'm wrong, and let's see if we could talk about it. I'm going to do a more or less condensed timeline of the occurrences of yesterday to this morning. I would like it if you could like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. I'm not going to actually harp on it. It's super serious. Let's get into it.
How confident are you, sir, that conflict with Iran can be avoided?
Well, I'd love to avoid the conflict. Iran's going to have to negotiate a little bit tougher, meaning they're going to have to give us some things that they're not willing to give us right now.
How imminent is an Israeli strike on Iran?
Well, I don't want to say imminent, but it looks like it's something that could very well happen. I want to have an agreement with Iran. We're fairly close to an agreement. We are fairly close to a pretty good agreement. It's got to be better than pretty good, though, but it's got to be, I'd much prefer an agreement. As long as I think there is an agreement, I don't want them going in because I think that would blow it. Might help it, actually, but it also could blow it.
So let's get one thing clear with this, right? It has always been the objective of the United States to prevent Iran from reaching nuclear enrichment, right? We're the world power. We don't want nuclear proliferation amongst nations that don't have it. If we could have it our way, no nation except for us would have nuclear capability, obviously. But the fact is, some people have it already, and it's like a Pandora's box. Once it's open, it never closes. We're trying to avoid nuclear enrichment in Iran. And Iran's critique to this was saying, we never intended on making nuclear weapons. We want to research nuclear energy, and it's our right as a sovereign nation to do so. And many could see that point. However, we also don't trust Iran. Iran's been known to lie. Iran has been known to fund people who can't be held accountable. So even if the nation of Iran has plausible deniability in a lot of the wrongdoings that it finances, those wrongdoings still happen under the influence and funding of Iran. So we don't want them to reach nuclear enrichment, right? And that's a hard line for Iran's negotiation. Everything else, Iran more or less is fairly malleable in these negotiations. That's why they said the first couple of days in these negotiations were going well, because they hadn't reached the nuclear enrichment conversation. But once that came up, that's a hard line stop for Iran. They're not going to give up their right to research nuclear energy. So, do I think there's a foreseeable future where we reach an agreement with them? Not if nuclear enrichment is a deal breaker, which is it's a deal breaker for us if they have it, and it's a deal breaker for them if they don't have it.
But we've had very good discussions with Iran. Whether or not we get there, I can't tell you, but it'll happen soon. I say this, Peter, very strongly. They can't have, whether it's going in or not going in, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I'd prefer the more friendly path.
And can you tell us what the Israelis told you that made you start to evacuate the dependents of servicemen and women who are stationed in the Middle East?
They didn't tell me anything, but I said, look, there's a chance of massive conflict. We have a lot of American people in this area, and I said, we got to tell them to get out because something could happen.
Now, look, I love Trump. I think he's a great president. I think he's the greatest president of my lifetime. I just don't believe that, though. I have a very hard time believing that he heard nothing, right? He may have not heard outright, we are going to bomb Iran this day at this time. But he definitely heard something like, we're going to move forward with aggression, or we're going to escalate the conflict. They definitely said something to the tune that there was going to be conventional warfare, and Trump picked up on it and started evacuating people as any responsible leader should. But I just don't buy this plausible deniability thing that the U.S. had no idea that this was happening.
Soon. And I don't want to be the one that didn't give any warning and missiles are flying into their buildings. It's possible. So I had to do it. I had the choice. Do I do it or not? Doing it has its downside, but it also has its upside. Like, you're going to save a lot of lives if it should happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Hours later, it did happen. So, moving forward, right? So that was yesterday. That was a couple hours before the strike from Israel into Iran. So this is the coverage that came shortly after that strike.
Attacked Iran's capital in strikes targeting the country's nuclear program.
Several top Iranian military leaders killed, raising the potential for an all-out war between these two countries. Iran responded by sending around 100 drones toward Israel. They were intercepted. It's still not clear how many got through. Iran threatening to hold the United States responsible as well. President Trump will meet with his National Security Council this morning, and Fox's Doug Luzader has the latest from Washington.
The White House is trying to distance itself from this attack, but there are clear signs that the administration knew something was in the works. Hours later, the impact was becoming clear.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the attack last night. It was an operation that involved not just an air campaign, but Israeli operatives apparently working on the ground in Iran. The targets, Iranian nuclear sites, scientists, and military leaders.
We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program.
Israel has already been fending off air attacks this morning. Posting on X, Iran's supreme leader threatened to retaliate. That Zionist regime, he wrote, should anticipate a severe punishment. By God's grace, the powerful arm of the Islamic Republic's armed forces won't let them go unpunished.
Well, I'd love to avoid the conflict.
Just yesterday, prior to the attacks, President Trump said he was trying to avoid this, hoping to continue nuclear talks with Iran this weekend.
So that's one thing that really irks me, right? A lot of people on the right will say that Israel is our greatest ally. An ally doesn't interrupt negotiations like this. Yes, nuclear enrichment was always going to be a contentious issue. That was always going to be a weak point in the negotiations. But Trump is the guy that wrote the art of the deal. Trump has pulled some pretty insane deals out of like a hat, right? He's done some magic on the international stage. The Abraham Accords, for one, was like something that seemed unprecedented, right? It went against decades of geopolitics and what we've understood to be the pathway to peace in the Middle East. If there was anyone that could have done it, it was Trump. Maybe he just needed more time. Maybe this weekend could have been the weekend that we got a deal to downsize the nuclear enrichment and create a lasting peace. We'll never know now. Israel chose to attack and putting their interests ahead of ours. An ally doesn't do that. An ally takes into consideration that we're working with this nation to get things done. But no, they chose to attack, right? They saw an opportunity. Iran right now is vulnerable. They spent a ton of money into these proxies. Iran right now can be attacked and have very limited opportunity to strike back. But this is where I deviate a little bit from fact and get more into speculation, right? This isn't completely fictitious, but this is my general understanding of things. It has always been in Israel's interest to become the main superpower of the Middle East, right? They got the small of Arab nations that are becoming sympathetic to them. You have Kuwait, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates. All of these people are becoming more sympathetic to them. Saudi Arabia. So who are the contenders against them? Well, there's Lebanon. There's also Iran, obviously. You take out the other superpowers and they become the main superpower, and they will dominate that region for decades to come. It was in every interest for Israel to attack Iran in this vulnerable state during our negotiations, at the detriment of the American interest. which is a lasting peace in that region.
But he has also said repeatedly that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, and these attacks could be a significant setback for the regime.
Trying to really dismantle and rubblize the key nuclear sites in Iran so that Iran can never get back to being as close as they were to a bomb before last night.
And there are reports of stepped-up security now around the Israeli embassy here in Washington, and this city is already locking down ahead of the Army's 250th anniversary parade tomorrow. In Washington, I'm Doug Luzader for Good Day.
So that was the coverage following Israel's attack, right? They launch missiles into Iran, strike their nuclear sites, take out their leadership. And politics aside, you almost got to admire it, man. How calculated this was. Ignoring the infrastructure damage that was done, the mines that were lost, like Iran's greatest minds that were propelling these programs, whether you say they were researching nuclear weapons or not, are gone. This sets them back possibly a decade into this research, into this infrastructure. Iran is put on its knees essentially from this attack, from an infrastructure and military standpoint, in my opinion. In fact, I would even go as far as to say that the aircraft that were leaving Iran weren't leaving to attack Israel. They were leaving to avoid being destroyed too. Get them off the ground, get them somewhere else, because it wasn't safe. I think that Iran is put in a very precarious situation they never anticipated. Right? Because it's always been the idea that Iran, one-on-one with Israel, has a chance of winning. Like, nuclear weapons aside, Iran, pound for pound, is a force to be reckoned with. But in this state of vulnerability that they were in, this was possibly the only time Israel could really smack them with not as much fear of being smacked back. That's to their benefit and to America's detriment. So this was the coverage following Iran's strike back, right? Because Iran wasn't going to take that sitting. I personally believe that it actually would have been in their best interest for an American relationship if they didn't strike back. It would have made Israel look horrible, right? Because Israel's whole preemptive strike doctrine is the idea that it is self-defense even though we hit you first, which I've never really been a fan of. But for a lot of political scholars, it makes sense. I think if Iran didn't do anything, right, and continue with these negotiations into the weekend, Israel would have egg on its face. Israel would look like the bad guy. And to many people, they are the bad guy. I'm not saying that I personally think that. However, I do think that what they did was largely inappropriate for the larger context of what's going on. But if Iran chose to just wait and not do anything, right, lick their wounds, they may have looked weak to their own people, but they would have been the rightful victim to the entire international stage. But they couldn't do that, right? Iran has to save face for its people. They have to strike back, even though they know militarily they're not in a position to strike back.
Tensions in the Middle East rising following a barrage of Israeli strikes overnight.
Yeah, Israel says it went after dozens of targets related to Iran's nuclear program and ballistic missiles in Tehran. Chris Sadeghi is with us now in studio this morning. And Chris, the world is watching to see what happens next.
Yeah, Mark, Israel struck first. They say since Iran has retaliated, and now we are awaiting word on the death toll and damages, while at the same time waiting to see how the United States might respond. The surveillance video right here that you see captures some of the blast there in the Iranian capital of Tehran. That's where Israel targeted their missiles, specifically at facilities housing Iran's nuclear program, where they believe nuclear weapons are being developed. Iran confirmed the attacks killed 2 of their top nuclear scientists, and images from Tehran show damage done not only to buildings, but to people in the street dealing with injuries. Overnight, Israeli Defense Forces say Iran quickly retaliated by launching 100 drones back at Israel. Air raid sirens were going off in Tel Aviv, and hospitals there were getting ready in anticipation even before the retaliation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Israel and the world at large, saying Iran must be stopped.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
Now, as for where the United States stands, the U.S. and Iran were supposed to continue talks concerning Iran's nuclear program on Sunday. No word if those talks will go on, but President Donald Trump did post on Truth Social this message saying that they are committed to a diplomatic resolution on Iran's nuclear issue, but said Iran must give up their hopes of obtaining a nuclear weapon. Mark and Gary, back to you.
Intentions.
Mind you, it has been stated over and over, Iran claims they have no intentions of developing a nuclear weapon. It's nuclear enrichment, right? Nuclear research into nuclear fission. It's hand in hand, right? It's a very short gap. That fission is really at the heart of it. I personally believe that any nation that's doing research into nuclear energy is only a short ways away from a nuclear weapon, and that's just the Pandora's box of it. There's never going to be a case where the current regime of Iran gives up research into nuclear enrichment, and any other nation wouldn't do it either, right? It's something that you feel like as a nation you have a right to research the things that you want to research. With that said, notice I said current regime. It doesn't show it in here, but the full speech of Netanyahu, he basically pleads to the Iranian people that, oh, your time under this regime will be short, you'll be liberated. He wants regime change. That's always been a goal of his, right? They don't want to conquer Iran. They don't want to take it over themselves. They don't necessarily want to turn it into a parking lot, but they do want to remove the superpower that is the current state of Iran. That's always been the goal of Israel. And if that includes dragging the United States into a war with them, so be it. But as a citizen of the United States, as a veteran, as someone who favors peace as a paramount, I hate the actions that they took. This puts us in a precarious situation. And I just don't see us staying out of this and reaching a peace deal now. Even if we want it. Let's even pretend that the Iranian government wants it, right? Let's say both of our governments want it and our people want it. The Iranian people, how are they going to want this? They just got struck. They just got blown up by an adversary nation. The government wouldn't be able to look at its people in the face and say, we're going to reach a peace deal with the United States after this happened. It just wouldn't happen, right? So, this was Trump's response to the strike.
The Middle East on edge after Israel launched a series of strikes on Iran's nuclear and missile sites. The attacks wiping out Tehran's chain of command in the process, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says this is only the beginning.
This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. The Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime. I've made it clear time and again, Israel will never allow those who call for our annihilation to develop the means to achieve that goal.
Welcome to the Big Money Show, everybody. I'm Jackie DeAngelis. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Taylor Riggs, Lydia Hu, and for Dagan McDowell, and Brian Bremberg. Joining us for the entire hour, Gary Kaltbaum, Kaltbaum Capital Management President. It's great to have you. Thank you for being here. We're watching oil prices today because they are surging on escalating tensions in the Middle East. You can see prices are up $4, $72.05. That's about a 6% move on the session so far. Israel says it has started shooting down dozens of drones launched in retaliation by Iran. President Trump urging Iran to, quote, make a deal before there's nothing left, before meeting with his National Security Council. Fox Business White House correspondent Edward Lawrence joins us with the latest. Hi, Edward.
Hey, and Jackie, all this is creating that uncertainty, the uncertainty about the global oil supply, and that's affecting the markets and causing the oil prices to rise. The president is finishing up, we believe, that national security meeting in the Situation Room with his national security team. On Truth Social this morning, the president saying that those hardliners in Iran, they spoke bravely. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left. So yesterday in the East Room, the president saying that he still wants to make a deal with Iran over its nuclear projects.
You see, now obviously I'm not in the White House, right? I'm not in the cabinet. I couldn't tell you exactly what was going through Trump's mind. But I think you look at the situation, right? You were making deals. They started to not go your way. 60 days has passed from the initial timeline that they set for these deals. 61st day, Israel strikes Iran. You're kind of taken for a loss, because you even warned Israel not to make any moves until the negotiations had finished. You already had negotiations scheduled for this weekend, and this happens. So now you have to lean into it, right? Because if you speak out against it, then Iran's going to expect you to act against it in a showing of good faith, right? You clearly disagree with what happened. You want to deal with us. Go against Israel. Say something to Israel. That's what would happen if Trump spoke out against the attack. And I could assure you, behind closed doors, Trump's not happy about this strike. Like I said, they could have had a deal this weekend. Who knows? We'll never know now. So instead of taking the side of I didn't want a strike to happen, now he has to lean into it and say, we need to make a deal before the strikes get worse. And personally, I don't love this situation, right? Because I think Iran's put in a position to where they couldn't make a deal even if they wanted to.
It's very simple, not complicated. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Other than that, I want them to be successful. I want them to be tremendous. We'll help them be successful. We'll trade with them. We'll do whatever is necessary.
So U.S. officials today say that they hope talks that were scheduled for Sunday will continue on Sunday. The effects of the strikes by Israel being felt on oil and stocks. As you see, the head of Gas Buddy thinks that we could see gas prices increase in the U.S. in the next 24 to 48 hours, but it will be a moderate increase.
Iran is a major oil producer, or can be, and so now with a war in Iran, war with Israel, there could be back and forth. Israel could attack oil facilities, and it could disrupt the flow of oil out of Iran, thus leading to lower supply at a time of year that many Americans are traveling. Demand is higher during the summer months, and that's why oil prices are responding in the way that they are.
But some market experts believe this might be an overreaction because the globe is fully supplied with oil. The head of the International Energy Agency says that there is enough supply of oil and they are ready to step in. So we'll just have to wait and see about the long-term lasting impacts and if the markets end up coming back.
Yeah, as far as oil, I think that it's an overcorrection. I think it's going to stabilize because there's so many more oil suppliers than just Iran. Iran is a huge oil supplier. That's their main export besides terrorism. But I think as far as oil, we'll be fine. All right, guys, so you've seen that, you heard that. My overall feelings about this is that Israel snubbed the United States. We were in the process of accomplishing this deal. We knew it was going to be hard. Talking down nuclear enrichment with Iran was always going to be an area of contentiousness, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And rather than give us the benefit of the doubt, hold off on their attacks, they chose to attack. And now Trump's put in a position to where he has to lean into the attacks to leverage this deal. Meanwhile, Iran, your leadership were just killed. Your facilities were destroyed. Civilians see this and they're outraged. Understandably outraged. You would be outraged if something in America was destroyed, regardless if the person who did it claimed that they were doing it for a righteous reason or not. You don't care about that. All you know is a part of your neighborhood's destroyed. So Iran, even if they wanted to reach this deal, they wouldn't reasonably be able to do it, not without their own people toppling over the current regime. But that might be what Israel wants, but they're not going to get the regime that they think. They might just get a more unorganized, more chaotic, more angry regime. But that is my take on it. I'm still learning about the situation. I'm trying to read more. The Middle East has always been a very precarious area of geopolitics, right? If we all had it figured out, it wouldn't be going on the way it does. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Where do you guys stand with our support for Israel in these attacks? Do you think that we should stay out of it? Do you think that we should get more involved? Let me know. But with that said, I'm Evan. This was the video, and I'm out. Peace.